day, students. Welcome to another episode of Schoolonair. I'll be your instructor for Basic Science and Technology GSS 3. So today we are going to be talking about processing of materials. Processing of materials. So these materials that we are going to talk about are plastics and rubber. So the processing of plastics and rubber. So at the end of this chapter, I hope you will be able to, number one, differentiate between rubber from plastic. Number two, explain the methods of processing of plastics and rubbers. So number two, explain the methods of processing of rubber and plastics. So number three, identify advantages and disadvantages of different processing methods. So there are different processing methods in processing rubber and plastic. So you should be able to identify the advantages and disadvantages of these different processing methods. So number four, mention the uses of plastics and rubber. So at the end of this chapter, you'll be mentioning the uses of plastics and rubber. So let's start with the introduction. So plastics. Let's start with plastics. Plastics, as man's development advances and technology as advancements become more and more pronounced, efforts were made to develop materials other than wood and metals, especially as containers or to carry things. So from the development of man and life, advances have been made to develop properties or materials that are very suitable other than wood and metals that are very common to carry our loads and carry out other activities that are going to make them suitable for. So this problem or this advancement led to the development of plastics. So hence the development of plastics. Before we discuss its property, let us first consider the types. There are two types of plastics. So when when the development and the advances and the technology came to man, we developed plastics. So let's talk about plastics in detail. There are two types of plastics. Number one, the thermosetting plastic, and the other type is thermoplastic. So there are two types: thermosetting plastic and thermoplastic. So this diagram is showing us the thermosetting plastic that are very rigid and thermoplastic that are less rigid. So you can see examples of thermosetting plastic and thermoplastics. So what is the difference between thermosetting and thermoplastic? Thermosetting plastics are prepared under intense heat and pressure, and once they set, they are not reversible. That is, you are going to put them under very high heat. So once they become the property you need, they cannot turn back into whatever you want to make them to. So when they set, that's why we call them thermosetting plastic. So thermosetting plastics are the types that they are prepared under intense heat and pressure. So when you had pressure and heat, once they set, they are not reversible. So they cannot be made back into liquid form of plastic or into the original shape that was meant to for them. So what is the other? So they retain their shape. So we are still talking about thermosetting plastic. So they retain their shapes permanently until converted back to the initial material, just like for metal. So once shaped, they cannot be melted. So this type of plastics, once they are shaped, they cannot be melted, unlike metals and other materials. So they can only be converted into the initial material they were made from. So you cannot melt them. They are very strong, very rigid. So when they set, we use the word set. When they set, they cannot be reversible to make other materials, unless you are going to make them to the initial materials, just like metal. So examples can be cited in electric plugs and sockets, dress buttons, tools, and knives. So the plastics in the electric plug